Dear colleagues, welcome to the panel session on the World Association of Marine Stations and World Congress of Marine Stations. We are now going to proceed to the third talk by Dr. Kazuo Inaba from Japanese Association for Marine Biology, who is going to talk about marine stations working together, regional alliances, and the World Atlas of Marine Stations. Kazuo?
We started to promote the collaborating research and education among biological and fisheries science marine stations and to build a Japanese unit of marine stations for global issue and activities. Here you can see the 22 members of JAMBIO at present, located from the north Hokkaido to the south Okinawa. And there are the marine stations from 18 universities in Japan. As an activity of JAMBIO, we have a JAMBIO coastal organism joint survey twice to 4 times a year since 2014, in which we visit a marine station and do sampling for marine organisms, identify and summarize them into a database. 22 surveys have been so far carried out at several marine stations in Japan. We provide opportunities for information exchange among JAMBIO community. We have JAMBIO forum annually and the International JAMBIO Symposium every 2 years. We also issue JAMBIO newsletter 1 to 2 volumes a year and distribute it to the member. This April, we have started a collaborating project with Tara Ocean Foundation, which is a French foundation dedicating to understand world's oceans. The topics is the microplastic. And the Tara team is now visiting several marine stations and surveying the microplastic impact all around Japan. Now I'm moving to talk about the regional association to a global one in Japan. More than 10 years ago, global collaboration among marine stations was expected to become indispensable against marine environmental issues. Then an international conference was held in Okazaki, Japan in 2007, where we exchanged ideas for International Association of Marine Stations. Then a small delegation of a European Marine Station Network, the MARS, met with the head of UNESCO IOC, Luis Valdes, and IOC representatives, and discussed on the global marine station network. In 2010, we had the first full meeting of the International Planning Group for the establishment of WAMS at IOC UNESCO in Paris. The idea of WAMS was brought into annual meeting of MARS, and we discussed on WAMS almost annually. In the MARS-WAMS meeting at Amsterdam in 2014, we discussed about making atlas of marine stations as an initial step for WAMS activity. This is, I think, Matt was talking about in his talk, but a directory of marine stations was already issued in 1963 by Robert Hyatt. But of course, some marine stations do not exist now after that, or change their name or organization. And also new other stations were founded thereafter. During the course of the edition for the Global Ocean Science Report of UNESCO IOC in 2016 to 17, we searched again for marine stations in the world. And it turns out that now there are 784 marine stations in the world, maintained by 98 countries. One of the pioneer figures of WAMS is definitely to make the World Atlas of Marine Stations, by which we know where they are located, what fauna and flora are found, and what types of researches are carried out. And above all, we will have a yellow page to start the communication among world marine stations. A working group is now updating the map in GOSR and making an initial address for publication. To end my talk, we marine stations would work together by global collaboration on research, monitoring, policymaking, and education for next generation, who will be responsible for future ocean and earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kazuo. We now have Matt joining the session, so we will continue with his talk, introducing the World Association of Marine Stations, which has already been partly mentioned by the talk of Kazuo, but I'm sure having both talks together will get us a clear and better overview of WAMS. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Kazuo, for giving your excellent overview first. So my name's Matt Frost. So I'm president of the European Network of Marine Stations, and I work with Kazuo and with Sasha and lots of others. And you've already heard about this idea from Kazuo to establish this World Association. But what I want to talk about is I want to talk a little. Oh, sorry. I want to talk a little bit more about how this is going to work and what marine stations actually are, and why are we doing this? What is the importance of world marine stations, particularly in relation to the UN decade? So I'm going to do a couple of things. Firstly, I'm going to mention some of the societal challenges. Then I'm going to mention how that links to the UN decade. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, it's the main part really, about marine stations. Why are they so important? Why are we so sort of passionate about this, about getting these marine stations networked and coordinated? And then I'll touch on WAMS and the World Congress, which you've heard something about already from Kazuo. So what are the societal challenges? Well, I think we're all aware the IPCC reports are talking about 1.5 degrees centigrade global warming. And it's not just the straightforward warming, it's all the implications of that. It's the implications for things like deoxygenation, its impacts across the board in terms of the biodiversity and all the sort of impacts we're seeing worldwide, how that then links onto fisheries and other areas. So as I said, I won't go into too much detail because I think we're totally aware now that we're looking at some real challenges over the next decade. So if we look at the IPCC report, for example, from warm water coral through kelp, through seagrass, you can see that all of the biodiversity is being quite severely impacted now. If not, it's predicted to be impacted at a very high level in the near future. And it's also then worth looking, at the fact that we've had we've had a lot of targets, a lot of policy-related agreements that are all about improving biodiversity. But recently, the CBD report looked at all of the 20 Aichi targets and said, none of them have been met fully and only 6 partially. So these are the targets around protection and restoration of marine biodiversity. So I think it's safe to say we've got a real challenge on our hands. And it's the same when we look at the Sustainable Development Goals. Of the 93 SDG indicators, only 22 have seen good progress made in the last 15 years. So I think, as a society worldwide, we're really not, for whatever reason, we're not meeting the challenges we're setting ourselves in terms of global marine and other biodiversity. And I think to bring it back down to specifically to marine, if you look at something like the Sustainable Development Report goals, we're actually not meeting many of the SDG targets at all. Some of them we're doing okay on, but one of the worst in terms of actually achieving is SDG 14, which is life below water. So actually, when it comes to the marine environment, once again, all I'm saying is we have these huge challenges we need to meet. And this is where the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science Development, Sustainable Development comes in, and you've been hearing about this anyway in the session, so you're all aware of what this is. But this is a really interesting and fantastic opportunity to actually mobilize capacity across the world in order to address all of these challenges, from climate change to the SDG goals to biodiversity restoration and protection. And if we look at what the Ocean Decade is for, as I said, a lot of you have heard about this already, but if you look at with some of the key things here, it is really very, very ambitious. This is talking about a global partnership. It's talking about understanding from the local to the regional to the global level, and it's talking about sharing knowledge and interdisciplinary marine research across member states, so essentially across all countries. And when you're looking at things like mapping the ocean floor, these are huge tasks, that we really need to get everybody working together in order to achieve. And this is really where marine stations come in. So if you look at the size of the task, and this is a global size task that we have to address. If we look at where we've been failing and what we need to achieve, if we look at the ambition to actually work together globally, in order to meet these challenges, one of the things that is a great untapped resource is our field stations, our marine stations. And Kazuo has already mentioned some of this in relation to the Atlas, and he's done some fantastic work already in mapping these. But essentially, if you look at what these field stations provide, most of them provide very good access to the environment, a lot of the coastal environments, but a lot of them also have facilities, ships, AUVs, and others to reach deep seas. So they're a really good way of providing access. They have fantastic facilities. They do world-class research. They provide a lot of opportunities for educational outreach. They often run citizen science programs. And also, a lot of them worldwide have long-term observational studies. If you really want to know what's going on over the last 100 years, or what has been observed, a lot of that is being mapped from these marine stations. So there's this vast untapped resource that we've never really brought together in a completely coordinated way. I won't spend too much on this because Kazuo's already mentioned it, but we're talking about a very large number of stations worldwide. There have been some attempts to map these in the past, both at the European and the global level, as Kazuo has already mentioned. But you can see here, this should, in theory, give us a capacity to work together on addressing some of those very ambitious global challenges. So I'm just going to go through some of the things that I've mentioned in terms of what these marine stations can provide. And one of the things is education and outreach. So here's a whole range here from Naples in Italy to Crete in Greece. Some of the world's first aquariums. You can see the MBA where I work in Plymouth, UK as well. Some of the world's first aquariums were actually put together and run for the public in these marine stations. So they provide a really nice connection to the public as well, which is really important, because ultimately the UN Decade and all we're trying to achieve is trying to energize everybody. It's not just about marine science, it's about getting the public involved and engaged. You can see there is a picture of an Easter class, which we were running in Plymouth back in the late 19th century. You can see all those rather dapper ladies and gentlemen in their suits and dresses wandering around and just being taught about marine biology and how it worked. We have aquariums all around, and also there's some pictures there. I had the privilege of being at the White Sea Station, where you'll hear quite a lot about shortly. And once again, it was great to see students come from all around Russia and elsewhere to learn about the immediate environment and learn about marine biology. So the education and outreach is a very important element of marine stations. I think the other thing, as I mentioned, is world-class research, and the best world-class research that happens at these marine stations happens when it is about coordination and networking. So here's a well-known example, at least it's very well known to me because it's linked to where I work, but you've got here Professor J.Z. Young, a very eminent and well-known marine biologist who was working in Naples in the early 1930s and was introduced to cephalopods. I didn't really know much about squid and octopus and other things, but he found them absolutely fascinating. So that happened while he was out working in Italy at a marine station there. And then he decided to carry on that work. So he then became based at where I am at the moment, the Marine Biological Association in Plymouth. And he worked on looking at these giant nerve fibers, these axons in squid. And this has great potential because in order to understand how nerve fibers work, up to that point, they'd all been very tiny, difficult to locate, difficult to work with. But this giant nerve fiber actually opened up all sorts of possibilities for research. So having come from Italy, he then did that work in Plymouth. He then went out to US and he worked at another marine station in Woods Hole. And that was where they did a lot of the work in really confirming what this giant nerve fiber was, and they described the way it functioned and the way it worked. So now you've gone from Italy, from the UK, out to working in the US. And then because of that work, it was picked up by Alan Hodgkin and Andrew Huxley, who came back to Plymouth later, just before and during the Second World War. And they used this to look at the whole sort of action potential across nerves and the way nerves work. And as a result of this, they won the Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine. And the basis of everything we know about neurophysiology, a lot of things, you know, think about brain surgeons and all that sort of stuff, comes from this work that was done in marine stations. But it wasn't done in one marine station. It was done because you had collaborators, and it actually involved collaborators from Japan and others as well, who were all involved in this work. So this is the real strength of marine stations, is they work together, they bring experts together, and you end up at the best level with a Nobel Prize, which is pretty impressive outcome. The other thing that these marine stations provide, as I've always mentioned, is a lot of them have been around so long that one of the first things they did was to map their immediate marine environment. So whether it's the Roscoff in France, which is one of the world's oldest marine stations, or whether it's Naples again, a lot of these places have mapped over a century ago in a lot of places their immediate environment. And you can see the White Sea station is also there. The MSU White Sea station once again is mapped a lot of its environment, and this is important not just because it tells us what the environment was like 100 years ago, but a lot of this monitoring has become the baseline for today, for what we understand, for why things changing and how things have changed. So this is an incredibly important function, and I have to say a lot of this monitoring is at threat from a lack of funding. So one of the things we want to do is really give a higher profile to this monitoring. One of the things that we've done through MARS, which is the network of European stations, is we actually got a lot of the data from all the different European marine stations together, and we were able to use this to actually look at patterns at a very large spatial scale. So you can look at things like rocky shores and look at algal cover or marine benthos, but at the European scale, by bringing together all of this work that had been done at these marine stations at the European level. So it's not just that we can understand what's going on in France or in Russia or waters in Japan, it's the potential actually to bring all this together and look at changes across a long time period and over wide spatial periods. And I think this needs better recognition, because at the moment, a lot of the focus, and understandably, is on a lot of the modern technology. So when you look at a lot of the modern systems, and people will say, well, this is what a modern monitoring system looks like. And you can see you've got smart buoys and ships and satellites and various other things. But what I would argue is that what's missing from this picture quite often is the marine stations, because what the marine stations provide is they provide, as I've said, that link to the public. So the public can't really get involved in smart buoys or in satellite measurements or, you know, research cruises around the world, but they can walk into their local marine station and learn about what is happening offshore. I've mentioned the time series, where the custodians of biodiversity monitoring. I've mentioned the research, but I think the other two things to add is the capacity building. So often a lot of people who are interested in marine science can go and learn about monitoring and learn about marine species and learn about the ocean at their marine stations. And also this pathways to impact. So a lot of the work done in terms of talking to our policymakers and our governments and inviting them to see what we do actually happens at these marine stations. And this is not new. And I think this is really important to say. This idea of bringing marine stations together has been talked about for a long time. In fact, I've been using the term marine station all the way through this talk. And the reason is because Anton Dorn, working in Naples back in the mid-19th century, his plan when they set up the Naples station was actually to have a network of what he called zoological research stations all over the world. And the reason he called them stations is because he thought they were analogous to railway stations. So the whole idea, as in that example I gave you, was that people would move from station to station, stopping off, working with different experts, utilizing different skills and looking at different capacities and facilities. And that was always meant to be the strength of the marine stations. They were never designed to work by themselves. We were supposed to be in this network. And people like Pierre Lasserre and others were publishing papers on this, 30 plus years ago, talking about the importance of these networks and how they should function. You've heard some examples already. Kazuo's talked about what's going on in Japan with Jambio. And this is the one that I run, which is MARES, a European network of stations with over 60 labs. But there are quite a few of these networks that have been formed over the years. Some of them are more successful than others, depending on funding and other things. But there is this constant drive to bring these stations together. So that's what leads us to the World Association of Marine Stations, with Kazuo has already mentioned. So it was actually quite a few years ago that the idea of this came up and was presented to the United Nations, IOC, UNESCO as a concept. And what we're in the middle of doing now is really reviving this idea that if we're going to meet the challenges of the UN decade and meet those societal challenges, we need to mobilize this capacity of the hundreds and hundreds of marine stations and all the experts, the thousands and thousands of experts that work there, to mobilize them and bring them together. And I think we'll see the strength of marine stations really highlighted if we can bring these together rather than work separately in our silos. So the World Association of Marine Stations, as I said, it's about capacity building, it's about integrating strategies, increasing knowledge, it's about integrating our response. And one of the things that we've tried to do, and Julia Lecocci, who's been working with me on this, helped pull this together, is looking at all the different ocean plans that exist for Europe, for different countries like Norway, it might be for groups of countries like through the Commonwealth, and looking at what all the challenges are. And this really is what WAMS should be able to do, is to look across and bring marine stations from Europe, from the Commonwealth countries, bring marine stations from the US, from Canada, and all around the world, and bring them together to actually start promoting that dialogue to meet these challenges. And one of the key things we want to do, we're supposed to be this year, but will be now next year, is we're working together with a number of partners to run a 3-day meeting, a World Congress of Marine Stations, where we're inviting representatives from stations and networks of stations from all around the world to come and join us in Moscow next year, where we want to actually sit down and talk about how we're going to run this World Association of Marine Stations. We'll be re-establishing that. We'll be formalizing who's going to be on that committee, what its aims are going to be. It should be a really exciting meeting because we'll be hearing from people all around the world, and it'll be the first time for many, many years at least that we'll hopefully have people from many of the countries and all the continents around the world talking about how we can better bring together these marine station experts. So hopefully I've left some time for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matt. That's brilliant and very interesting talk. For the questions, we will address questions to all 3 presentations after the next talk, after talk of Alexander. But thank you very much to those who have already started submitting their questions to the chat box, and I will use this as an opportunity to remind that if you have any questions, you're very welcome to do so. And after the next talk, we will have dedicated time for the panel discussion, where we will try to address your questions, and you could either type them or ask them in person as well. But for now, we are going to move on to the next and last talk of the first part of our session today. And this is going to be the presentation by Dr. Alexandr Cetlin, the director of White Sea Biological Station.
My talk will be about White Sea Biological Station of Moscow State University, and I think as all other marine stations around the world, White Sea Biological Station is unique place and unique station, and at the same time is typical station, because all stations are more or less similar from the point of their function. The station was founded in 1938, and in 1939 the first few students visited the station. Nikolai Pertsov, the station bears his name, was the director and the one who built the station in its present form. I mean, its infrastructure and its idea to be station mainly devoted to the education, or perhaps both education and science. White Sea Biological Station, situated on the coast of Kandalaksha Bay of the White Sea at the latitude of the Arctic Circle. It is situated on the Cape Kinda Peninsula on the shore of Velika Salma Bay. Cape Kinda is a piece of untouched northern taiga, wetlands, and small lakes. White Sea Station, located in between 2 protected areas, Kandalaksha State Reserve and Landscape Protected Area Polar Circle. It means that actually the station is situated in the untouched nature, and all kinds of industrial activity practically not allowed here, except perhaps the very small scale fishery. White Sea Station is an isolated settlement. There is no road, and during the summer we are connected to the nearest village by boats, and during the winter by snowmobiles. Recently, about 800 students, teachers, and visiting scientists work at the station every year. Students visit the station from June to September, but scientific work goes on all year round. The station hosts introductory courses in marine biology and invertebrate zoology, and about 15 advanced field training programs for bachelors and masters, from embryology and comparative physiology to marine geology and geophysics. Our tradition is that students get involved in scientific work while they are doing their field training at the station. More than 15 master's, bachelor's, and PhD dissertations are performed here every year. Annually, the station conducts international field courses. Course topics: comparative embryology, comparative physiology, marine biology, benthic science, ecology of marine benthos, and many others. Facilities: Lab of Molecular Genetics, Lab of Comparative Physiology, Center of Microscopy, Marine Biology Lab and Collection. We have White Sea branch of Scientific Collection of the Zoological Museum of Moscow State University, Marine Mycology Lab and Collections, Laboratory of Experimental Zoology, Marine Aquarium, Center of Underwater Observations, underwater photo and video registration, a team of scientific divers. 10 classrooms equipped by microscopes and stereo microscope for 8 or perhaps 100 students in one time, library, living space for 250 people, and dining hall. Web-based staff consists of 12 researchers working in cooperation with a number of labs in the mainland and 50 technical staff, sailors and others. White Sea Station fleet consists of more than 15 motorboats, including 2 boats equipped for various oceanographic works, several motorboats for passenger and cargo communication with the mainland, diving boats and rowing boats. Underwater observations were started at the station in 1961. Now our diving team is headed by Alexander Semyonov, one of the best underwater photographers in Russia. Every year, new students came to Alexander to learn methods of underwater observation. On this photo, you see perhaps the first scuba dive to the White Sea in 1961. One of the important resources of the White Sea Biological Station, data on the biodiversity of the White Sea. The vicinity of biological station in relation to biodiversity is better studied than perhaps any other area at the latitude of the Arctic Circle. Online catalog of biota of the vicinities of the station includes more than 600 species. Area of White Sea Station is a type locality for more than 100 species new for science. Also, our resources are database on the underwater communities and illustrated atlas of marine creatures of the White Sea. You see the cover page of this atlas, very popular. Why in 80 years after its foundation, the White Sea Biological Station is still so attractive for students and scientists? I see several reasons that are generally traditional for biological stations. Diverse fauna and flora available for sampling. The very complete data on the biodiversity of the surrounding area, catalog database collection. Good scientific equipment, simple but acceptable living conditions. And last but perhaps not least, a creative atmosphere stimulating new projects and interdisciplinary research. A few years ago, I was asked, what is doing the biological stations? And after some thought, I answered that biological station is a place where students became scientists. And I think it is a very important part of work of every biological station. Why do we need WAMS? Last year's White Sea Station actively cooperates with some other biological stations in other countries, in Norway, France, Taiwan. However, I see great opportunities for expanding this collaboration. It will be beneficial for our research, of course, and provide unique perspectives for students. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alexander. That was a very interesting talk. In the next 20 minutes or so, we have a chance to have a panel discussion, which means that any questions from the audience can be addressed to any of the speakers that have presented their talks so far. So you could address your questions to Dr. Matt Frost, Dr. Kazuo Inaba, or Dr. Alexandr Cetlin. And I can already see some questions in the chat box, so I think we will just proceed to answering them. So the first question is coming from Eleni. In fact, she has two questions, and the first one is, what do you think is the future of marine stations after the COVID-19 era with the restriction of traveling? I think this question is very relevant to all marine stations, so I will invite any of the speakers to take it.
I mean, maybe we can all chip in. I think at the moment, obviously there are issues because, you know, we don't have the same freedom of travel we had. So there are going to be impacts, but most of the stations that I'm aware of are carrying on the work within their stations. So we're not hopefully losing a lot of the sort of biodiversity monitoring and mapping. Really depends how long COVID-19 goes on for, because we thought this was going to be very brief, and it's going on a lot longer than we thought. So yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer. I mean, I don't think it's as serious as that it's going to affect the future of marine stations per se. I don't imagine there's going to be loads of them closing down as a result of COVID, but I imagine there will be bits of work that may be delayed or impacted. And obviously it's impacted us quite a lot in our plans to bring everybody together. I don't know if Kazuo or Sasha want to add to that.
Yeah, I have no good idea at this moment, but as far as my recent activity in my research station, we are rejecting all the researchers from abroad based on the rules of the traveling. And even the student or researchers from inside Japan is partly rejected. So because we have to keep the social distance not to be affected COVID-19, and we have to give the appropriate situation for example, sampling. So actually, I don't have a good idea about if we can hold the WAMS meeting face-to-face. But hopefully, I really want to do it face-to-face. But yeah, we only can see what's going on in the future. So yeah, of course, just in case we have a online meeting, and in this case, I think not a limited organization, but other organizations that could not participate so far in that WAMS meeting can participate. So we anticipate more participant, more organization to the WAMS meeting.
Thank you very much, Kazuo. Alexander, would you like to add anything about the current restrictions and how do you think things will look like in the future with the COVID restrictions?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Of course, nobody knows what will be nearest future, but at least this summer, I mean summer 2020, our station worked, but unfortunately, we were not allowed to accept no one student. So it was perhaps the most strange season in my life. Yeah, but hopefully next October will be time acceptable for not only online meeting, but perhaps normal conference. I don't know.
Thank you, Alexander. We certainly do hope so. And I think many of us can relate to this year being a particularly challenging and strange one. We have another question from Yeleni, which I think is also very interesting. And the question is, do you think that the opening of new marine stations is welcome, or do the existing one cover the research needs? And I think we could address this question to Kazuo, because you were talking about the Atlas of Marine Stations, so you're probably the most aware of all of us about the diversity of marine stations.
So the question is, to open a new marine station, is acceptable or not, something like this?
Is it welcome? Do you think that the
Welcome.
existing marine stations kind of cover most of the world oceans and cover all the research needs? So are there any particular areas that lack marine stations at the moment?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on the region. And for example, in the situation of Japan, we have a lot of marine stations around the coast of Japan. But for example, at the middle portion of Japan main island, face to the Japan Sea, there are only 2 marine stations. But that region is quite interesting with a unique current, and sometimes we can find very unique animals, and also we can come and access to a very deep places in Japan Sea. And that is very interesting place, but we don't have much marine stations there. So when we think about such a situation, to open a new marine station around there is very, very welcome. And we have a very good connections with that new marine stations. But and also when we look around the world, I think there are also many places that is missing marine stations, very empty, vacant spaces. And to do the monitoring all over the world, we need at least the minimum number of marine stations to that point to cover all the ocean area in the world. That's my opinion.
Thank you very much, Kazuo. Matt, would you like to add anything about whether there are any particular areas that you think lack marine stations at the moment, to the extent of your knowledge?
Yeah, I think one of the, I mean, I agree with Kazuo totally. I mean, one of the key things about the UN decade, for example, is about equitability. And I think because of the history and where the resource has been, that there are certain places like Japan, like a lot of Western Europe, like the US, you know, that are very well served by marine stations. But there are huge gaps in resource worldwide. And a lot of the developing states, things just don't, they either don't have the stations, they don't have the coverage, or if they do, they're not as well equipped. So one of the things about the UN decade, and I hope the World Association of Marine Stations, is it can really improve this, because there are areas where there's a lot less resource than there is elsewhere. So yeah, I would like to think that in the long run we'll at least have some basic monitoring and facilities and access in place, much more equitatively distributed worldwide.
Thanks a lot, Matt. I think we're going to move on to the next questions in the chat box now. The next question is from Alexandra Yershova, and it is for Matt. And it is a challenging one because it kind of covers the political context, but I think it is an important one, so I think we should discuss it. The question is, how do you see the integration of Russian institutions and their observations experience into the world monitoring system? For example, POGO doesn't recognize Russia as a full participant in research and observation programs. And Yelena thinks that there might be some problems with other world monitoring networks. So yeah, in terms of establishing global networks and political challenges, do you have any comments to this question, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak particularly from the UK, but I think from everybody's point of view is that we're really keen to work with the Russian marine stations. There's, I mean, from the scientific point of view, I don't really want to get bogged down too much in geopolitics, but from the scientific point of view, we're very excited about working with Russian marine stations and Russian scientists. And I think that there are a few reasons that this perhaps hasn't happened historically. One of them is, I remember the first time I visited Russia, I didn't actually know about some of the work that was going on there. I hadn't seen, I mean, Sasha's talk on that marine station on the White Sea. The first time I went there, I was so impressed. It was just a fantastic marine station with this amazing monitoring. The education and research that was going on there was amazing. But I didn't know anything about it. But actually, on the back of that, I know quite a few other people began to hear about it. So I see Russia being more and more integrated as more and more people become aware of what is going on in Russia. I think that's part of it. A lot of it is just people don't know. As far as the politics, I don't run Pogo, so I can't really speak for them, but I would be very surprised if any scientists in any country were precluded from being involved in monitoring programs just as a result of politics. I would be very surprised and, well, not really happy about it, because at the end of the day, we're all scientists trying to work together. So hopefully, one of the things about working with the World Association and the World Congress in Moscow, and you know, I have been out and worked with colleagues there, we'll see this vastly improved. So this question, I hope in a few years, won't be relevant, because the Russian marine stations will be well integrated. That's, you know, I can't speak for every country and every organization, but that would be my opinion. I don't know if I mean, maybe Sasha wants to say something about that.
Yes, thank you very much, Matt. Alexander Borисovich, I think that it would be really interesting to hear your perspective as well. How does the international collaboration look like from the perspective of White Sea Biological Station?
Until now, I don't see real restrictions or real, let me say, new iron wall to stop scientific collaboration or joint projects and things like this. The same for students exchange, perhaps. But what is really problem that it is very difficult, perhaps impossible, to get some European money inside Russia to the project based on the university or at the station. But, you know, it's just reality.
Thank you for this comment. Yes, funding is always a challenge, but it is good to hear about such a diversity of international projects and exchange programs that are already happening in Russia, and particularly in the White Sea Biological Station. So the next question that we have in the chat box is also related to international collaboration with regards to WAMS. So this is the question from Kara to Matt. Thank you very much for your talk. I am wondering if WAMS intends to offer an international access program similar to Assemble Plus program in Europe.
Yeah, I can say, and then Kazuo may want to add to this as well, but my feeling is that in the long run, once WAMS is established, it would be a really nice thing to do, but we're a long way from doing that at the international level at the moment, because the first thing we need to know is what's out there. And I think that's where Kazuo's work with the Atlas has been really important, because we need to know where the marine stations are, but we also then need to know what facilities are at these marine stations, because Assemble Plus works because there's a very, very good list of where everybody is working and where the, you know, these size ships are, or where these particular microscopes or bits of kit are. And I think that's going to be the next piece of work that WAMS will have to do before we can look at an access program. But I think Alexander's point is also very important, that Assemble Plus has a lot of funding, European funding, to facilitate people moving around and accessing the laboratories. And I think that's going to be one of the big challenges that WAMS faces, is how do we actually get this funding? Because I might say, well, it would be great if I go and work out, I don't know, in the Philippines at a marine station there, but you need some funding to do that. So I guess the short answer is yes, we would like to see this happening in the long run, but I think it's going to take us a little while to get there.
Thank you very much. Kazuo, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I basically agree with Matt. And of course, we will, hopefully we will start such a program, including international access. And also the WAMS should be basically non-profit, non-political association. And basically we have to work on the basic science, basically. And also in that, we just can be associated with each other from every countries. And that would be the basis of our association. And of course, the Atlas Marine Station is very important to know what kind of people are working in the marine station, in what kind of marine stations. So we should start it as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Kazuo. Next, we have a couple of questions about the Congress of Marine Stations, so the meeting that was scheduled to happen in 2020 and is currently rescheduled. And yes, so the questions are with regards to the ongoing pandemic, do the organizers consider to hold this meeting as an online event, or are there any more specific dates at the moment? I think this was partially covered in the talks, but I would pass on microphone to Matt to maybe comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to answer, isn't it? Does anybody know? I think the feeling from the program committee is that we would like it to be in person, because there's just something very kind of special about meeting people face to face and having that level of discussion. So our intention very much is still that we will hold a meeting in person in Moscow late 2021. If this pandemic continues and we find ourselves in the spring, summer of next year still not being able to do that, then I think what we would likely end up doing is holding this meeting virtually, but with the idea of still maybe having a physical in-person meeting later. But it's really hard. I'm kind of guessing because we just don't know. So I don't know if Alexandra or Kazuo want to answer that, but it's... I think what we're saying, sorry, just to make sure I've answered the question, there will definitely be something happening next year. If we're not able to hold it in person, then yes, we will hold a virtual meeting. We won't put it back another year after that.
Thank you very much, Matt. And thanks everyone for being so active in the discussion. We can now see not only the questions, but also some comments from the audience, and they're more than welcome. So if you have any thoughts on any of the questions that have been discussed so far, please feel free to type them. And also remember that we have a raise your hand function. So if you want to bring something in the discussion, ask a question or have a comment, feel free to use that and we should be able to unmute you. I think we are going to take 4 to 5 more questions before we proceed to the next part of the meeting, which is the flash presentations. So we'll have a quite specific questions to Alexander. If you could comment on that, maybe just follow up directly with the person. But Sarah is wondering, have there been any French research stations that White Sea Biological Station has been collaborating with?
Marseille station, station in Marseille.
Thanks so much. I hope this is the answer that Sarah was looking for. And the next question we have from Julius Sigward, and yeah, this is a very important issue. So the question is, marine stations are always being threatened with closure in bad economic times. Is there anything that WAMS or any other networks of the stations can do to help identify and protect vulnerable stations? So far we have been talking mostly about networking, but have there been any supporting mechanisms to help stations that face some financial or other challenges? I will invite any of the participants to take these questions if you have any comments on that.
I mean, I can go first. It's probably one of the main things I'm hoping will come out of WAMS is a much greater appreciation of the value of these stations, because I think often they're not fully appreciated. One of the problems, though, is ultimately a lot of these stations are linked to universities and other things that, and when they have funding problems, they look at these stations that tend to be very expensive to run. And they're sometimes, I can speak for the UK, the first thing to go. If a university is struggling, often they'll just axe a marine station. So I know I'm just reiterating the problem rather than a solution, but what I'm hoping will come out of WAMS, as I said, is that we can support each other, and this doesn't always work. So, for example, we've had within Mars, we've had issues where the marine station has been at threat in years gone by, and we've written a letter, for example, to the relevant authorities to say this is part of this big network. We really think it's valuable. It hasn't always done the job, but if people can start to see that a marine station isn't just important in itself, but is part of this much wider collaboration, just hopefully by having that noted and better known, it will give a better level of protection. But yeah, that's all I can say at the moment. It's a very difficult one, because they are expensive. Yeah, I don't know if Kazuo or Alexander want to add to that, but I think it's a really important question. So
Yeah. Yes. I have seen such marine stations also in Japan. I mean, the most of the marine stations in Japan is a university marine stations, and of course we have to pay much for the running cost of marine stations. That's a problem for the university. Small university, if the small university want to keep the marine stations, they need much money to keep it. But of course, they need money for another thing. So marine stations are kind of a minor thing. So that the university tends to cut the marine station in this situation. But of course, once they cut off the marine stations, it never cannot be restarted. That is very important. But of course, it's a university problem, so it's very hard to advise something to the other university. But in terms of the WAMS, at least we can say that the marine station is quite important worldwide for monitoring or a recent activity of UN decades in terms of international consensus to maintain the marine station is quite important. But unfortunately, we cannot do anything about practically to stop the cancer of the marine stations.
Thank you very much, Kazuo, and also thank you for highlighting kind of relationship between universities and marine stations, so the link between education and marine stations. And I think in the chat box, we also had a comment from Professor Murray Roberts regarding that. So I was wondering whether Murray, you would probably like to unmute yourself and read out this comment or expand on it. And this is also going to be a little teaser for the one of the flash presentations that we are going to have next about the relationship between the university and marine station.
Thanks so much, Anna, and hello, everybody. My name's Murray Roberts. I'm based in Edinburgh, where Anna's doing her PhD. And actually, I've been quite reading the chat, enjoying that very much. And I think we can probably team up very nicely between universities and marine stations. Matt's quite right. The history in the UK is checkered in that regard. And there's been some unfortunate history there where resources get tight. But actually, I think looking forward, we have to do a lot more together than perhaps we're used to. I won't steal the thunder from Kevin Scott and the presentation we have coming up, but we want to announce a new strategic collaboration between a university and a small marine station. And I think there's a lot more we could do in that space. And let's not forget, this global infrastructure is incredibly elaborate, well-developed and important. And I think getting that message as matters is central to what we have to do. Look at all the societal goals of the UN decade. What else would you do to achieve those goals? You'd probably go out and build a network of marine stations, I think. And I think we should work with that. I'm so excited that this Congress is happening. Thanks very much, Anna.
Thanks so much, Marie, for your contribution. So the next question, or the next point of the discussion that I wanted to follow up from the chat, is from Jens, and it is about the Sustainable Development Goals. So the question or the comment is, I wonder if in the context of the SDGs, there is also an international process of monitoring or planning the progress of becoming a model of sustainability or something like that. So the question is about the relationship of the WAMS and marine stations in general in addressing the global Sustainable Development Goals. Matt, would you have any comments on that?
Yeah, but apologies, I'm not 100%. Do they mean about WAMS developing a process so that the stations become a model for sustainability?
I think the question was whether there are any international frameworks existing for that, and whether this is something that WAMS is also taking into consideration. Yeah,
I mean, once again, I hope that we will. Yes, I mean, I have to keep stressing that, you know, we're talking partly future tense here, in the sense that we're, you know, WAMS is still at a very early stage of bringing things together. But I think it's incumbent on the marine community as a whole to be models for sustainability. I mean, an example of this is the new research vessels that are being made both in the UK and Russia and elsewhere. There's a, you know, they're usually made now with the relevant sort of criteria, so that they're, well, I don't know if they're carbon neutral, but, you know, their carbon footprint is a lot lower than maybe it would have been in years gone by. I think marine stations should be, you know, looking at becoming models in this respect. But I think the important part of this question really is about sustainability, and I think you know, sustainability is really at the heart of, obviously, is the UN decade. But I think that you're going to see a lot more of the marine stations and, you know, marine biology and marine science as a whole is really grasped this, you know, that actually if we're going to manage and our oceans sustainably and develop things sustainably, then we will need all this scientific information at the forefront of providing evidence. So yeah, I'm not sure if I can point to, I can't speak for every sort of laboratory around the world, or even in the UK, as to what their internal processes are. But yes, we have, as a marine community, we need to be doing our best to run our research on a sustainable footing, running our laboratories on a sustainable footing, because otherwise it's very hard for us to talk to others about doing that if we're not doing it ourselves.
Thank you very much, Matt. I think the author of this question has followed up, saying that they mainly were asking about the efforts of individual stations. So what I'm going to do now is, Jen, you can now unmute yourself if you want, and you can read out the comment that you've just submitted, or maybe if you have any other thoughts or examples of how individual stations can address the SDGs, please feel free to contribute.
Hello. Yeah, I was just wondering and thinking that with this education and communication function of the marine stations in mind, and with the urgency of achieving something, and Matt, your presentation, I think, really highlighted how short we are from achieving this. So I thought, imagining that the international global network would exist, and that all those stations would run the operations itself with the SDGs in mind, that would be a really powerful message. So planning or implementing a kind of a sustainability program within the station for not on the research itself, so or with the research goals, but just the internal process on the within the stations itself to monitor and see itself, where are we, where do we want to go, and what do we have to do? I think that could be alone, of course, a huge project and not easy to do, but I think it's important.
Yeah, thank you, Jens. I think that's a really excellent point, and I would hope very much that yeah, that would be completely integrated into the thinking of WAMS, both feeding out to the marine stations, but hopefully a lot of the marine stations are already doing this, feeding into WAMS about how we can manage that. So yeah, excellent point. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the question and the discussion about this question. And I think the last question that we are going to take in this part of the session is something that also has already been covered in the talks, but probably worth further clarification just to make sure that we are on the same page. So the question is about WAMS and the structure of WAMS, and it is probably addressed to WAMS. Is the intention of WAMS to be an organization or organizations? So will there be an opportunity for individual marine stations to join the network?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer this one first. No, the intention for WAMS is that it will be for any marine station, hopefully as many as we can all around the world, to become a member. Obviously, initially, the way we're developing WAMS, it makes sense for practical reasons to engage with the networks. So, for instance, to engage with representatives who can go and speak about the, like Kazuo is doing for Jambio, for example, and we're working with organisations like Pogo and others that have these very large footprints already. That's just a practical thing to begin to make sure we have these connections. But in the long run, WAMS should engage both these networks, but also the individual marine stations. Yeah, that would be fully the intention. Kazuo or Alexander, do you want to add to that? Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, WAMS initially established as an assembly of a local association like Jambio, Mars, GMM, and there are 800 marine stations in the world. So of course we welcome every marine station to join, but I think we have to think about the organization of WAMS, because it's not a scientific society, but it's a kind of organization of marine stations. So we have to, initially we have to join some of the local network to join WAMS. How do you think, Matt?
Yes. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And actually, one of the things we're doing at the Congress is we're going to be presenting some practical ways that we can establish WAMS and run WAMS. So some of this is still being discussed, but very much our desire is that, yeah, as many of the marine stations worldwide will be involved in this as possible.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Matt, Kazuo, and Alexander, for your presentations and for the very interesting discussion. And we certainly hope to hear more from you next year during the World Congress of Marine Stations and further down in line with development of WAMS. And now we are going to do something slightly different. So in the first part of this session today, we heard the presentations of kind of core members and organizations that are already in the WAMS in development. And in the next part, we are inviting contributions from the audience, from the participants of this session that are representing different marine stations or networks of stations that are not necessarily part of the process yet, but we just wanted to have a taster of the amazing diversity of stations that we have gathered here today, and that will hopefully also be a part of WAMS. So the next part of the session is going to be flash presentations. So we are asking the presenters to be very concise they will only be allocated 2 minutes. So we will be changing slides for you. All you need to do is just ask us to switch the slides. And those are the 4 presentations that we have received, and hopefully we have all the authors present today in the session. And without any further technical introductions, I would like to invite Dr. Masaya Marita to talk about the soccer station as a part of University of Ryukyus in Japan.
Thank you. Today, I'd like to introduce about our station, Sesoko Station, University of the Ryukyus. Next slide, please. So our station is located in subtropical area in Japan, you see here. And then our station feature is in front of the coral reef. So you can access coral reef very easily. Just jump into from this pier to the ocean. You can just reach the coral reef. So we are very easy to access the coral reef. So we can do from field working and the laboratory working. And we also have the large scale of the aquarium so we can keep the coral so long for many long time. Next slide, please. And then our research is related to coral reef. So our faculty staff are doing two topics related to ecology and physiology. And then one topic about ecology is one example of ecological study is larval dispersal in the coral acropora. And the other one is impact of ocean acidification on the corals. And the physiological study is just you see the many coral is spawned synchronously and then how they recognize own species sperm and eggs. Next slide, please. So this is one example of the study of physiological study. They release the gametes synchronously and then how they choose their own species sperm and eggs. Next slide, please. The last slide is just before the COVID-19 situation. Our station accepts researchers and students from many countries before COVID-19. Most facilities and accommodation are available for those guests. Sometimes we had a beer like this situation. Unfortunately, now not. So I hope things return to normal as soon as possible and wish many researchers and students come back to our station. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting, and I certainly hope that there will be opportunities in future to resume visitors and those photos look very, very fun. Next, we are going to move from the tropical region to more northern cold seas, and we are inviting Professor Murray Roberts, who we have already heard today, and also Dr. Kevin Scott to talk about the St. Marine Station and University of Edinburgh collaboration.
Thank you very much, Anna, and hello everyone again. So I'm really delighted actually to have the chance to announce this new strategic collaboration between the University of Edinburgh and the St. Marine Station, which is on the North Sea coast. The University of Edinburgh is a collaborating partner in the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, and we're going to take that opportunity very, very seriously as we move forward. I'm also pleased to say we've recently signed an MOU brokered by Anna Gebrook with Lomonosov State University, and we look forward to following up some real discussions with the White Sea Station to build on Anna's work. So Alexander, I would love to meet you in person as soon as we can, but in the meantime, I hope we can get online soon. So if I could go to the next slide, please. I'm going to do this presentation very quickly and then pass to Dr. Kevin Scott, who is the field station manager, and Kevin will show you some of the facilities in St. Abbs. Now, the St. Abbs Station is a very beautiful place. It's also a very, very intriguing development that Kevin will explain the background to. It's built entirely non-ferrous. There is no iron in that facility. As a result, it's a picture-perfect place designed in the right way to look at the impacts of electromagnetic fields on marine life. And Kevin and his team have developed a very nice expertise in that area. So when we look at the focal areas of this marine station, the first one is actually on looking at how we might develop standards and build upon the great work established by that marine station in the understanding the impacts of renewable energy in terms of electromagnetic field effects. We also will be focusing on multiple stressor experiments as we move forward. The three horsemen of the apocalypse, I often refer to ocean warming, acidification, and deoxygenation. We have a very good facility to do that and to build on work in the academic community and across a great number of projects that have run over the last 10, 15 to 20 years. Some new aquaculture approaches, including restorative aquaculture approaches. I'll mention some of the details around that in terms of the partnerships within the University of Edinburgh that make this possible. This particular research theme will develop with our colleagues in the Roslin Institute, who've got a very, really a great expertise in genomic and aquaculture genomic approaches. So that's something we're very excited to see forward, see develop into the future. We'll also be working strongly with the School of Biological Sciences, where we have macroalgal specialists who use macroalgae in evolutionary genetics. So rather than just focusing on the problem, in other words, marine life is changing. Okay, we know that by now, but how's it going to adapt? We're going to put a lot of focus into that adaptive evolutionary question. So the roll call of institutions within the university involved are the Roslin Institute, the School of Biological Sciences, and the School of Geoscience is where I sit and my research group sits. Finally, last bullet point, doing what we're doing today, raising awareness of what it is we're doing. And as I mentioned when I was given the microphone earlier, I think it's a good news story where a university has proactively engaged with a marine station. This is a deep engagement. It's a financially committing engagement, and we're very excited to announce that today. If anybody's interested, please be in touch with myself or with Kevin Scott. We'd love to take things forward. I'll now, Anna, please pass the microphone and go to the next slide. And I'd like to bring Kevin Scott into the presentation.
Hello, hope you can all hear me okay. So as Murray said, St Abbs Marine Station, our facility is located in the southeast coast of Scotland in the historic fishing village of St Abbs, which is great because it allows us to maintain a great working relationship with fishermen, and we're only 4 kilometres away from a larger port which does more offshore work, and that is Eyemouth. So you can see on the map here our location in relation to the rest of the UK. Next slide, please. So this in the background is another view of the marine station here, situated right on the seafront. So it was established originally in 2010 as a non-profit, so it's a Scottish registered charity. And the building was funded entirely through private donations. To date, we work, as most people do, through grants, so we apply for grants. And kind of jumping back to one of the previous points in the discussion, I mean, I've been based at the marine station now for about 7 years, and I am extremely impressed with the willingness of different universities to get involved, not just financially, but, you know, collaboratively. You know, we host a lot of students, volunteers, interns, and it's been great to see that. Next slide, please. So our facility, as Murray said, is actually built using glass reinforced plastic. So you can actually see the column beams and along the roof. This is great. It's minimal electromagnetic interference, which allows us to create uniform electromagnetic fields. We also have a clear roof, which allows us to have natural light conditions, and we have a state-of-the-art pumping system we can use to pump 80,000 litres an hour throughout our facility. We have upwards of 100 tanks, ranging from 100 litres to 100,000 litres. Next slide, please. And we also have 100,000 litre mesocosm. So this is a 4-metre deep tank. It's currently acting as a kelp forest, which is great both in scientific research, but also as an outreach tool. People love to see the marine environment if they can't get out there themselves with diving. Next slide, please. We also have a laboratory and an office. This is especially great when we do have student groups. I mean, we've had students over the years, undergraduate right up to PhD, we've hosted them. And we have a really, really important volunteer and internship program that we've ran over the last 7 years. Through that, we've had upwards of 300 individuals join us from over 10 different countries, all trying to gain this valuable practical experience, which is something that we are more than happy to offer. And we are always on the lookout for collaborations and people to work with. Murray gave you a brief overview of some of the research that we do. We're very, very specialized in some areas, but we're also open to other research areas. So anyone who's interested, wants to know more, please get in touch with myself or Murray, and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Murray and Kevin, for this wonderful overview. And it is very exciting to see the new relationship and collaboration establishing and developing. And we're looking forward to hearing more about that in the future. And now we are going to move to another region. And we have Dr. Bayram Öztürk representing the Turkish Marine Research Foundation. Unfortunately, it seems that we might have some microphone issues here, so we will just very quickly look through the beautiful slides provided by Bayram for now, and here is the contact email. So if you're interested about any details of the research conducted in the station, I'm sure you can contact Bayram directly. So Alisa, could you help us to move on to the next presentation now? Thank you. And for the last flash presentation of today, we have Mr. Joel Castaro representing the Marine and Environmental Science Center in Portugal, who I can see among the panelists now. So hopefully you shouldn't have any problems unmuting yourself, and we are very happy to change the slides for you.
Thank you very much. And I'm speaking about this center from Portugal. This is the largest center, Portuguese research center on marine sciences. Can you please move in the main goals? You can see that we not only do research on marine science, but also in the aquatic science in all the river basins also. Can you move down, please? We have poles of several universities from Coimbra and Leiria, and several in Lisbon, one in Évora and the other in Madeira. Can you move down, please? And from these universities, we have 6 marine research stations located in the coast. In the north, number 1 is from the University of Coimbra, is mainly related with research on estuaries, also on the rocky coast. The second one, we have a marine station, good facilities for aquaculture experimentation. These aquaculture conditions, facilities, we have also near Lisbon, a marine station that is located just on the rocky coast, and also close to large estuaries. The other one in mainland in the south, where I am working now, is in the coast of Alentejo, a very nice and well-preserved, and also scientific diving. We have a small boat, and we have also accommodation facilities. The same applies to the other 2 stations in Madeira Island that are close, related with also to research on exotic species. You have a small photograph of these marine stations, and that's all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing the brochure of MARE. We will make sure to make the link available for all the participants of this session. And with that, we are coming to the end of the session today. Thank you so much again to all the participants who contributed to the discussion. Thanks to our technical moderators who helped us with some technical issues that we had in the beginning of the session. And thanks so much to our panel speakers, Dr. Matthew Frost, Dr. Kazuo Inaba, and Dr. Alexandr Cetlin, for your brilliant presentations in the first part of the session, and also in addressing all the questions later. So we still have some questions that we were not able to cover during this meeting today, but hopefully this is just the beginning of the discussions and collaborations, and we will see you all hopefully next year in the World Congress of Marine Stations. And just one final comment is that we have 2 more sessions during the Online Marine Research and Education Conference today. So just in 15 minutes, we are going to start the UK-Russia joint session on marine expeditions in the Arctic. And the link to this session has been forwarded in the chat earlier, so you are still very welcome to join if you're interested. And the last session will be the special session on biological folding. With that, I thank you all again, and that was a pleasure to have you here, and we're looking forward to continue working with you later. Thank you.